the teeth while rushing to disarm us? Is it because they don't want us to be armed during the collapse?
I think that's a pretty fair statement. When the bond market collapses, as we've talked about, because it's a bubble, it's in a 300-year high bubble, and I look at what's happening in the markets to give me a clue what the big money is doing, and I know that J.P. Morgan over the past couple of years has been developing huge positions, monopoly-like positions in food, copper, industrial metals, and in precious metals. And they're doing so because they know what's coming, that hyperinflation is coming, and they want to be able to totally control that market. For example, J.P. Morgan just got involved in launching an exchange-traded fund for copper. So that means, and before they did so, they bought something like 20% of the world's copper supply. So now the price of copper is going to start going up aggressively higher because it's being manipulated higher, because J.P. Morgan and the bankers on Wall Street want to have a new way to make money. It's going to be on commodities. They've made all the money they possibly can over 30 years in the bond market, because the bond market, the interest rate under Paul Volcker got 15 to 16% on the 10-year bond. It hit this huge high on the interest rate. And during the past 30 years, it's now gone down to zero. During that 30-year period, it was the biggest bull market on Wall Street in history, selling bonds and bond-related equities and stocks and options, et cetera. Now that 30-year period is over, and we're going to enter into a period of commodity price appreciation. J.P. Morgan already knows it. Goldman Sachs already knows it. And they're buying huge positions into these markets. And as far as what's in the U.S., if the price of food gets to a certain level, it causes riots. We know historically that when the price of food gets to around 40% of an individual's income, you look for a riot. That's the point it got to in Egypt before the Egyptians staged a riot, a revolution in their country.
And they don't want us armed so that we can't protect ourselves, but that might actually cause total rioting where even the government gets taken down. But the tyrant's instinct is to disarm us so much they still don't care. But historically, if they take the general public's guns, that will make the government even more unstable.
Right. So in the U.S., the average American spends something in the order of 12 to 15% of their income on food, and it's still, it's not at 40%. But as prices now begin to go up because of the manipulation coming and the collapse of the bond market and the loss of purchasing power from the dollar, you're going to get to the point where the food costs are going to be out of reach for a very, very large percentage of the population.
And so stay there. We got to go to break. I got to say this, Max, as bad as things are right now, the good news is I see panic and fear in the establishment's eyes. They're power grabbing right now, and they're so insulated. I don't think this is going to go well for them. Let me tell you, I'm not bragging about this. I don't tell this story like I'm a big shot. It's actually pretty creepy and freaks me out and gives me anxiety. I went to Big Bend National Park on the Texas-Mexico border this weekend, and there were people from France there. There were people from New York there, California. In some cases, 80% of people, if I stopped or something, just to sit there and take photos, if I was in a congregated area, would say, Alex Jones, and it wasn't from really Piers Morgan. I'd say, how do you know about me? Oh, I've been listening for years. Listen, when upwards of half or more of people know who I am and say they agree, no matter where I go now, Max, I can go to the hike and bike trail, and in some cases, everyone that comes by as a listener. I'm not bragging and saying I'm a big shot. It's scary, Max, because I don't want to die. They might come after me. I don't know how. Our numbers don't show we're this big. Yeah, 15 million a week. The 15 million a week is not enough to have people from France knowing who you are. And then the next table knows who you are, and then the waitress knows who you are, and then somebody else comes over. I mean, what's going on with that, Max?
Well, I've told you, when I've traveled in the Mideast and around Europe and Asia, and people know me from the TV show, and almost invariably that people say, and I watch Alex Jones, and it's just the power of the internet. People watch your videos, and the message resonates all over the world.
And you're getting recognized all over now. I mean, the establishment better be concerned.
Well, I think your message resonates outside of America more than it does inside of America, because people outside of America have already been dealing with outright tyranny for decades, for generations, and they know exactly what you're talking about. It's only inside America that your message falls on deaf ears in some cases, because America has been very quiet for decades now. Post-World War II, it's been a Shangri-La. It's been a happy town because we've benefited from winning that war, and we've had a 60-year run. But that's coming to an end because a lot of the trends that shaped the good times are finishing, and we're entering a new period. So it's funny that in your own country, you're not as well appreciated, I think, as you are outside of your own country. I can anecdotally tell you that from traveling to these countries and hearing people talk about you extremely with great fondness, more so than I hear people from the U.S.
Well, just to be clear, I didn't even bring this up to say, hey, I'm really big, folks. It's actually creepy. Because what I'm saying is that the word is getting out. Let me show people some of these headlines. Wrangell. Some of the southern areas have cultures we have to overcome. And CNS News even has video of him saying this on the news. I mean, like if you live in the South, you're just bad. If you're a gun over, you're a Nazi, period. Lawmakers introduce bills to ban high-capacity gun clips. Texas sheriffs, I will not enforce law I consider unconstitutional. Same thing with Missouri sheriffs. My point is look at this. Sarkozy to move to London to avoid France's high taxes. I mean, how far can these bureaucrats go till everything collapses?
This week in Switzerland, of course, it's Davos. And Davos is really the primo of all the New World Order get-togethers. I think it might even be more influential than the Bilderberg meetings, because here you have in the highest mountain in Switzerland, really the cream of the cream coming together and cutting deals and doing deals. And so it's happening this week. And this is where now we'll find out in a couple of weeks what they decided to do in Davos. And we'll find out what companies got bought and who's going to go after whom, and a lot of news will come out of it. But I think Davos really in Europe is the #1 event of the year for these guys, these tyrants, like Tim Geithner, who just came out the news that in 2008, 2007, he was selling information to Wall Street about which way the Fed and the Treasury were going to move interest rates. He was alerting the banks through private conversations, essentially selling information, because he'll go to Davos and he'll get paid a lot of money from the folks. That's where the bagmen
They use speeches as a way to get paid off. I remember you on the show.
They show up with bags of money. The Geithner, and they're right there with their bank accounts. He's already got caught cooking the books for his own tax returns a few years ago. So they just go to Davos. That's where they hand him the bag full of money. He can stick it in one of the private banks there, and it's there now for the rest of his life. Davos is where Tim Geithner gets the $20 or $30 million, just hand it to him in precious metals or diamonds or cash, and he stores it away. That's what they do in Davos. That's what it's there for. That's where the New World Order gets paid. Today is payday for the New World Order in Davos, Switzerland. They worked all year. They got their bonuses. They get them today in Davos, this week in Davos. Buffett gets his big satchel of cash. Geithner gets his satchel of cash. Everyone gets paid this week in Davos. So let the parties flow.
I want to shift gears. Again, ladies and gentlemen, we're obviously going to go into overdrive. We're showing pictures here, a live feed from a helicopter that CNN says you're not allowed to see. So we've entered a new Orwellian level here where CNN and other cable news channels are saying they're not going to show live feeds. We have the KHOU feed, so you can see it. They must have huge servers, as this is being watched all over the country. We have the KHOU feed posted at Infowars.com. And PrisonPlanet.com right now. But CIA operative takes responsibility for Algerian gas plant attack. In the video, Mokhtar said to be the mastermind behind the terrorist attack by the Islamist Al-Mujahideen Brigade in the gas complex in Algeria, takes credit for the operation. Now, let me show on the document cam viewers this. Radio listeners can go to Infowars.com. This is confirming what the London Independent was saying. Terror in northern Africa, are Westerners pulling the strings? And it has the Prime Minister, Sayal, telling reporters that it's an English accent groups leading the al-Qaeda forces. Well, we know al-Qaeda works for the West. They've given them Libya and Syria. They've now taken over Libya. They're deploying into other areas and then using this as an excuse for NATO through AFRICON to invade and run raids into these areas. Just absolutely amazing. And U.S. begins transporting French troops and equipment into Mali with another staged event as a pretext. I mean, how unveiled does this have to get where the West publicly runs al-Qaeda? I mean, does that not add massive credibility to everybody that pointed out that government was involved in 9/11?
Well, Tony Blair, give him credit for setting up the collapse of Libya, his relationship with Gaddafi. He profited handsomely from that. He's a Davos guy, Davos man, Tony Blair. He's cutting deals all over the world. And, of course, Mali is the collateral damage of Libya because all those weapons suddenly found their way onto the street and into Algeria and into Mali. And so there's the whole, what they call the Maghreb, the North African region, is now become, controlled by those folks that are at war with the banksters, the Western interests that have been, screwing with them for a number of decades. And the response from the U.S. and Britain seems to be completely wrong-headed. They don't understand why the problem started. They don't understand why the problem continues, and they have no idea how to end the problem. So they're just going to continue to foster continuation and spread of enemies. When they send drones into Pakistan or these places and just murder people indiscriminately, they're breeding problems. And of course, they don't have the money to pay for all this, so they have to borrow more money. Who are they borrowing it from? China. China's now at war with Japan, who's allied with the U.S. So we're in World War III right now. It's being fought in the currency pits. It's a currency war, and it brings us back to the fundamental reality that countries like Germany are repatriating their gold. The Netherlands is repatriating their gold because they don't trust it anymore. They want out of Dodge. They want their gold, and they don't want to play this game anymore. And that's why gold is going to go to $10,000 an ounce, because the gold is not in these vaults. It's been sold already to pay for these stupid, ridiculous wars. How
are they going to cover it now that these countries are all demanding their gold out of the private Federal Reserve? Geithner's over there, hanging out at Davos, the public Bilderberg meeting. I mean, it's just their craziness.
They're going to cut them a check. They're going to cut them a check and say, okay, we owe you $30 billion in gold. Here's a check for $30 billion. And these countries will say, wait a minute, we want the gold. And they'll say, sorry, we don't have it. Here's the check. Sorry, it's tough luck. And that's when that's when all hell's going to break loose, because then you're going to realize that the gold has been sold. It's not there.
What will it look like as the countries say, give us our money, they say no, that's